Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty Podcast, coming at you live on the Fantasyholics Podcast Network. Brant, it is good to be back with you. We missed last week, obviously. Still kind of digesting all that was the NFL rookie draft a few weeks ago. We're still crashing from the 4-hour live stream we did along with Patrick from the page that day. But in our home leagues, we've done some fantasy rookie mock or actual drafts. We're going to break one of them down here. It's actually a special one to you and I. We took over the orphan team in this league with a bunch of other Fantasyholic team members and some not Fantasyholic team members. And, we're excited about a rebuild, so we'll kind of talk about the process of that on today's show. But we also have some special announcements to make. We'll save those for a little bit later in the show. And we are going to discuss some deep dive rookies to keep an eye on for the tail end of your draft as you're throwing out darts, hoping to hit something to stick on your taxi for the year.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk about some deep dive rookies to go on, guys that you think will be there. It may take a year or two to develop. But yeah, this is a fun draft. You and me took over a nice orphan team, and you know what? Let's hit our intro, and right before we dive into that, I'll break down a little bit about this orphan team. But let's get our bibs on.
Let's see. All right, Brant. So like we had talked about before the intro, we took over an orphan team. I know you wanted to say some quick things about that, so I'll let you jump straight into what you had to say about that.
Yeah, it's an orphan team in one of our Fantasyholics dynasty leagues. We went in and we had some draft picks. We moved some things around. We discussed some players to drop and everything else. It was a fun draft because there was a lot of moving pieces for us. And I can't wait to dissect some of this and tell our rationale behind it and everything else. It definitely was one of the funner drafts that I've had lately because we did, like I said, we got to do it together. It's a little Fatboyz team. So it's going to be fun to digest here.
Yeah, absolutely, Brant. And again, for the purposes of it, we're going to share the mock or the actual draft on screen here shortly. And I think it's imperative to state it's obviously a super flex league. There's a tight end premium. Little bonus points in there for the tight end position. Again, and we took over a team, Brant, that had Devon Achane at running back and then nothing else. We had some good aging pieces that we moved off of for some draft picks that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point in this episode as well. But yeah, it was one of those. It was one of those drafts that it was really slow at some points, and then all of a sudden it was steam hitting, and there'd be 4 or 5 picks rattled off in a split second. You'd have you'd be on the clock and you'd have 7 or 8 trade and offers sitting in your inbox. So it was definitely a fun thing to be a part of. I wish all rookie drafts were as exhilarating as that one was, Brant. But let's get this one on the screen without further ado, so we can go ahead and talk about this. Let's hope this pops up the right way. There it goes. Not necessarily the most computer literate person in the world here, but we got it on the screen for us here, Brant. So let's go pick by pick at this. Obviously, we'll share a little bit more. We'll show a little bit more about our picks as they come up. Obviously, it says Finley 73 on there for our team, Brant. We'll get that team name changed at some point, but this was as the draft unfolded. So let's go through the first round. Obviously, the first pick, Brant, Caleb Williams. Is there, in a super flex, is there really any other consideration for you, for anybody else at this point?
The only way you're considering it is anything else is if you are set with two long-term quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes and I don't know, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and you need a wide receiver. That's about the only way I could even vouch to go any other way. But Caleb Williams is the only proper way to go in a super flex.
Yeah, I agree. Too much talent around him, too much chance for him to be successful, immediate impact. Odds are if you have that number 1 overall pick, you need some help. So Caleb Williams is the guy here. Obviously, we see Marvin Harrison go off the board at 2, Brant, which again, you said if it's not super flex, he's the obvious pick. Thoughts on him going before the quarterbacks?
So it is to be said, Castle Black here, another guy in the Fantasy Holics, did have back-to-back picks. So really he could have gone, it's kind of like the Houston Texans last year. He could have gone either way with his picks. So let's just talk about Marvin Harrison and Daniels right here at the 2-3 turn. He went the right way. Those are the two names that should be going in this area. You can make the case for Daniels to go ahead. You can also make the case for Marvin Harrison. It all depends on what your needs are at that time.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. And again, for me, Daniels, May, and JJ McCarthy are all kind of after landing spots. I'm not really that sold on any one of them. I'd be okay with any of the 3 of them, but they're definitely not as high as Caleb Williams, which I think is fair to say. At 4, I think this one was kind of a surprise to you and I, because you and I were sitting at 5. You did have Malik Neighbors come off the board, who, again, Johnny was drafting there after just taking Caleb Williams, so that may have been his rationale behind passing on, a quarterback in favor of taking a playmaker and Neighbors. Grant, what is your thoughts on Malik Neighbors in front of some quarterbacks?
So I'm going to jump around here just a little bit throughout some picks. Johnny also had the number was at 6 there, where he took Drake May. He took another quarterback. His quarterbacks going into this were Hooker, Prescott, Locke. That was his quarterbacks. So he went in, he grabbed himself Malik Neighbors, knowing that either May or McCarthy was going to be there at the 6th spot, regardless. So he did that. He took the best player on the board, and that was a strategy pick right there. I think you see both these quarterbacks, if not at least one of them, slide in front of him. This is a very good strategy pick where he thought he knew one of these two quarterbacks were going to be here. So I don't care which one I get. Let me go ahead and get the best player on the board right now. And in his mind, it may have been a coin toss between these two quarterbacks. So this is a strategy pick, and I absolutely love what he did there. But yeah, I think you have to make the case for one of the quarterbacks. Not both slide in front.
Counter argument, though, would it not be to guarantee yourself you get at least 2 starting quarterbacks out of this draft class when you only have Prescott on the roster? Taking JJ McCarthy and hoping Drake May makes it back to your other pick, or Drake May and hoping JJ makes it, might have been a better option as well. Because worst case scenario, if you don't get both the quarterbacks, then you do get Malik Neighbors. And again, those quarterbacks that you got to have in a super flex, we all know you have to have 3 competent starters, hopefully for no injuries, but because of bye weeks, there's just too many points getting put up by the quarterback to replace them. But anyway, we were on the clock at the 105, Brand, after the Malik Neighbors pick. We had a lot of internal conversation. I think we were on the board for about 15 minutes of conversating between Drake May and JJ McCarthy. We both agreed on one thing with JJ over Drake. What do you think the underlying reason that you wanted JJ was, Brant?
The weapons were there, and he doesn't have to fight too much. He's got Sam Darnold. We don't think that it's going to be too right away that he starts. We think that there is going to be a leash on Darnold, but we also had Darnold there as his backup in case McCarthy does not start. So that was mine. It was the weapons, and that's the biggest thing. And we know those weapons. Addison's only in his 2nd year, and I believe they just re-signed Jefferson, so they're right there.
Yeah. Again, we both agreed that there was long-term success, with an established head coach in Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, as well as, the TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson bits to play along with it were definitely something that we wanted to see. And JJ's young too, so I think it was we could have went either way there probably and been happy and sold ourselves on it, but we went with the player that was going to be thrown to Justin Jefferson next year because on a team that had nothing, we needed something. So no surprise there. We already talked about Drake May. Rome, I don't think is a huge shock. That should have been the next pick off the board, probably, Brant. So I'll move on to pick 108 and 109 because I think this is where the argument could be made that there was a little bit of maybe some indiscretion. This won't be the same in every draft, but at 108 you had the first running back off the board in Jonathan Brooks, and then at 109 you had the speedster from Kansas City, Xavier Worthy. Brant, what do you think of those two picks?
I think you got to throw 110 in there too. You got to talk about possibly Bo Nix being able to be talked about moving up there. I think all three of these guys it's your preference here or what your need is. Brooks is not going to be an immediate impact. We know he's coming off that ACL injury, but he does have one of the clearer paths to be in the number one. So I do like this. I think I would probably go Worthy over Brooks regardless, but I don't hate this pick. I know you and me were talking about trying to figure out a way to get up there to go get him. And it just wasn't, we didn't think we'd have to get that high to go get him. So I think Worthy is the case. I do think he's tied long term to Patrick Mahomes. So I think Worthy really should be the case here.
I think there's another wide receiver that we're going to talk about in just a minute that I personally would probably take over Worthy. I know there was some thoughts on you not being so in love with that player at some points, but you brought up the Bo Nix pick. I don't dislike Bo Nix. I think, especially in the Superflex, he's going to start as the starter in Denver there with a pretty established coach as well in Sean Payton. The weapons are not bad. He's got some okay weapons. Bringing along Troy Franklin, I think, is a huge boost for Bo Nix year one. But I do think in a Superflex, there's definitely some value there. The big shot for me in round one, Brant, was Brock Bowers falling all the way to the 111 in a league that does have tight end premium boosts and points on. So is there anywhere in this draft that you were like, okay, if I was on the board there, I probably would have been considering Bowers? Or do you think 11's about the time where you would have been on eyeing him as well?
In a tight end premium, I think you really could make the case starting at the 108 is where I probably would have started eyeing him. You got your main names off the board. I think the 108 is where he probably should have went in a tight end premium because I don't care really where he landed. He is so talented. Eventually, he will be the guy in Las Vegas once Adams is out the door. I don't care if Mayer's there or not. Brock Bowers is too talented not to keep the ball out of his hands.
Absolutely. And then to finish out the first round, you had Keon Coleman come into the first, who I thought would be a second round pick potentially. I do personally like him a little bit better than Xavier Worthy, projecting just because Keon Coleman is so much closer to being the alpha in the Buffalo offense, whereas Xavier Worthy's got a pecking order to get up. Keon Coleman, first 112 too early for you, Brant, or comfortable with that, or how do you feel?
No, he's tied to Josh Allen. I'm comfortable with it. He is the X receiver there. Right off the bat, there's really not a whole lot that's going to compete. I think Kincaid may be the target hog to begin the season, but Coleman's a guy that I was not in love with. A lot had to do with the way of the quarterback throwing in college. That was just the way the system was, a bunch of jump balls. So I think it'll be interesting to see, but I think that he's ready to get in. I've watched a lot of interviews, and I think he's ready to get in and get to work with Josh Allen. So this is a guy this is right where I would start considering him at.
Okay. All right. So moving on to the second round, we'll go a little bit quicker. We'll go a few picks at a time here, Brant. You have Brian Thomas come off the board at the 201, Trey Benson 202, and Ladd McConkey at the 2-3. I know there's been a lot of conversating between who's the number 4 wide receiver in the draft after the big three. Is it Brian Thomas? Is it Ladd McConkey? Is it Xavier Worthy? You can see how the dominoes fell in this draft. What do you think of those first 3 picks in this draft or this round?
So originally I was not sold on Brian Thomas. I wasn't sold. I thought it was a leap, everything else. Then I realized that he literally got overshadowed by all-world wide receiver Malik Neighbors there in college. Brian Thomas could be a sneaky guy in this draft, and he's one of the first people I want to bring up as we talk about sleepers and everything. This is the guy that could end up being easily the number 1. We saw Christian Kirk was all right there as the number 1 2 years ago. Ridley's out the door. Brian Thomas has a very clear path to be the number 1 guy. with long term with Trevor Lawrence. So Brian Thomas is a guy that I really do like. And like I said, when we did this draft, I wasn't sold on it. I dove in, watched a little film, watched a little background on him. This guy could be a sneaky good pickup in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, I don't think he's necessarily a sleeper. I do think pre-draft, a lot of people did have him as a top 5, if not the number 4. I know I'd seen several posts and so-called experts leading up to the draft that were talking about landing spot. He could get himself into the top 3 potentially. But yeah, I think for me personally, I still think I take Xavier Worthy over Brian Thomas, but I take Brian Thomas over Ladd McConkey. And again, it's just a preference on quarterbacks at that point. I think the only reason Xavier Worthy's even in my conversation is just being tied to Mahomes. So at the 304, Brant, you had Blake Corum, 305 picks, and then at 26, you had Ricky Pearsall. What do you think of those 3 picks? Anything stand out to you there? Any reaches? Anything you don't love this early?
You have to take Penix right there. Penix slid way too far. Eventually, he's going to be the starter in Atlanta. Yeah, I understand. You know, he's probably going to sit a couple years, but eventually he's going to be a starter in a super flex. Blake Corum is the guy. We've seen this year in and year out that McVay likes to have a workhorse, and I don't know if Blake Corum can surpass Williams there in that backfield. You could be waiting a year or two until you see return value on Blake Corum. I think that's a little bit of a reach. Pearsall, you've got to wait and see what the offseason continues to bring. If a receiver leaves, this is absolutely where I see him. And since we did our drafts now, you got to take him where you see him at the start of the season.
Okay. Again, I agree with the Penix situation. I think it was pretty spot on for him. He's a prime example of why our dynasty leagues have taxi spots, right, Brant? Like, he's one of those guys you draft him. Yeah, you have to spend a decent amount of equity on him because he is going to be a starter and he's going to be tied to some decent offensive weapons when he takes over. But you plug him in your taxi and you just forget he exists until there's a reason to move him off of there. I don't dislike that there. I don't necessarily hate the Blake Corum thing because we also never saw Kyron Williams be a workhorse in college. He wasn't asked to be that in the NFL, and he kind of really fell into his lap. To start the season last year, the Rams wanted Cam Akers to be that guy. It just didn't work out. They shipped him out of town. Kyron did great things, but I think there's a chance that you see Blake Corum get some, especially in the preseason, a chance to really show his worth. And if he goes out there and does some things and impresses some folks, I mean, this is a stout running back, a big boy we're talking about. If he goes out and shows some things, maybe he cuts into that Kyron Williams workload a little bit. We'll see. I don't hate it, especially in a draft class where the running backs are weak. It's not like any of these guys are necessarily a for sure thing. They're all kind of, grasping at straws. 2-7, Xavier Leggett. 2-8, you had Roman Wilson, and 2-9 was Jalen Polk. Again, a lot of wide receivers coming off the board here, Brant. This is not a real strong running back draft. Any of the 3 of those really like, I'm not a fan, or?
I'm not sure you got the best wide receiver in New England. I'm not sure you even got the second best wide receiver out of Washington there. That one to me is a reach. The rest I can live with. I don't believe in Polk. He struggled when McMullen was there back healthy in Washington. So I don't know if he's even going to be a huge asset on the team. I know they don't have much there in New England, but I think that's a bit of a reach.
Okay. Yeah, I love Roman Wilson. I think Roman Wilson could be an absolute asset. Pittsburgh typically hits on their wide receivers. That makes him even more intriguing. Xavier Leggett's the one for me that I really have a hard time loving, just because I think there's so much pressure on him being a first-round pick by your hometown team. Again, he was a late breakout in college, Brant. So, not crazy about that one. All right, the last 3 picks of the first, you had Troy Franklin. What is it? Michael Corley. I'm going to mess up that first name. And Adonai Mitchell. Malachi Corley. There it is.
Malachi.
I knew it would come to me eventually. Obviously, we had traded for the 211. This was part of a big trade we did to get up into this pick. I love this name here, Brant. I'll let you talk about why you were on board with this pick, and then I'll discuss why I wanted it. And then if you have anything else to add about these other 2 names.
So he has a leg up already going in. His quarterback is going to be his best friend from college that he had. And Cortland Sutton has not shown his potential in all these years. Yes, he's been good. But in my mind, it's Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims and then Troy Franklin. Like there's nothing else there that scares me. Yeah, they got Josh Reynolds, but he doesn't really scare me. He's a great role player and he's great doing what he's asked to do. But there's a clear path for this guy to be the number 2, possibly the number 1, if Cortland Sutton continues his role.
Yeah, again, Brant, Troy Franklin for me is one of those guys that I think he could walk in and potentially take over the number 1 in the Denver wide receiving room. If that happens, if he's a guy that, hey, that chemistry's too good with Bo Nix. Sean Payton's one of those guys that likes to do those quick, get the ball out of the quarterback hands quick, let your receivers take over, as we saw with Michael Thomas making that slant route famous all those years ago. You could really be talking about Troy Franklin being a guy that you're like, wow, maybe this is this year's Puka Nacua. Obviously drafted a little earlier in this rookie draft than Puka was in a lot of drafts last year, Brant. But yeah, it was one of those plays that was, again, our roster that we took over in this league was deprived of talent. We needed to get a talented guy that we could plug in and play year 1 at wide receiver to fill out a lineup, and that was it. As far as the other 2 names on the board, I like Malachi Corley a lot. I've picked him up in a lot of leagues that we've drafted in already. I think there's a clear path for him to walk into the season as the number 2 option in New York. So I'm a big fan of that. And Adonai Mitchell, honestly, he slid too far. And one rookie draft I've done, Brant, he's been in the 3rd round. This one, he almost made it to the 3rd. Again, you're tying him to an exciting young quarterback in Anthony Richardson. I know there's some pecking orders to get through, but the talent wins out, and I think Adonai Mitchell was talented. I know he was one of your top 5 favorite wide receivers to start this rookie process before we found out the teams.
Absolutely. I'm going to talk about Malachi Corey for just a minute before we move on. The reason we couldn't draft him, because I would have been pounding the table with you, is we needed a guy to plug in year 1. Malachi Corey, I think Corley is 1 year away from being a huge asset as the number 2 guy there. You have 97-year-old Alan Lazard still, who is good friends with Rodgers. Rodgers trusts him a lot. Got Mike Williams on a 1-year deal, looking like he's on track for week 1. Corley, I think, is 1 year away. If we were able to sit and wait, I think I would have probably pounded the table a little harder for this guy. I absolutely love this pick here. This is a great guy to go out and be looking. If you're set at wide receiver and you can hold off a year, this is a guy to steal.
Yeah, and again, maybe Aaron Rodgers being there for a year or 2 doesn't have to scare you off if you're willing to wait for a year on this guy. Moving on to the 3rd round, we had Ben Sinnott out of Washington, tight end. Lloyd out of Green Bay was taken at the 3-2, and then Jalen Wright was taken at the 3-3, Brant. Both of those 2 running backs, I know you and I tried to trade up to get just to have a couple running backs on our team because we were so desperate for the talent. Those 3 picks, love them, hate them. Where are you at on those 3?
I love it. You hit the nail on the head. Lloyd is Sinnott is probably the number 1 there in Washington for tight end. Lloyd, he's behind Jacobs, who wasn't. It took a lot of carries to get him really going 2 years ago. And then AJ Dillon, who hasn't been able to do it. So I love this Lloyd pick. Wright's a guy that he only needs 2, 3, 4 carries in a game, and he could be fantasy relevant, just like A-Chain was last year. So I absolutely love these picks.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with any of them. Probably right where I would have had one on the board as well. The 3-4 was a little bit of a surprise to you and I. We thought maybe this name would fall to us. But Estimate there to Denver at the 3-4, Ray Davis at 3-5, and then Von Baker at 3-6. I know you're going to talk about Baker, Brant, so I'm going to let you have that one right off the jump here.
Yeah, Baker is a guy that I thought was going to slide one more pick to us. We needed one more pick. I really wanted this guy. As you guys can see on the screen, we had 4 straight picks in a row after this. We'll go over those here shortly. Baker, I think, is going to be the number 1 guy. He's already come out with his confidence. He's come out talking about how he gets, people in wheelchairs to stand up. He's ready to get to work. He's tied to Drake May for multiple years. There's nothing really there that scares me. I love Baker coming out this year, and I think this guy is going to hit the ground running. I absolutely love this pick.
Yeah, I think Baker's definitely one of those guys that there's a clear path to him. Again, the number one wide receiver, the X, if you will, in New England is wide open. Maybe they got it right in this year's draft. We will have to wait and see on that. Estime is another one that you and I both liked a lot, Brant, because there is a clear work role for him there. Jamal or is it? It's not Jamal.
Javonte.
Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin. There you go. I was thinking of Jaleel. Jaleel McLaughlin are the two in front of him. Jaleel looked good at times last year. Javonte, we really haven't got to see him get his explosiveness back from his ACL injury. So there could be a lot of work for Estime to get in there. And so again, at a third round throw in a rookie draft, that's not a bad spot to take him. Honestly, you could have taken him in the second round, and I would have said, yeah, I could understand why you would do that there. All right, Brant, we'll talk about the next 4 picks at large because we were involved in all 4 of them. So let's just go ahead and do this. We had Sanders at tight end out of Carolina at the 3.7, Allen at the 3.8, Camille Vidal at 3.7, and then or 3.9, excuse me, and then Jermaine Burton at 3.10.
I'm going to leave. I'm not even going to talk about Burton. I talked about him in our last show as a sleeper. I absolutely love him. I think Higgins is out the door, and I think Burton will be there. I'm going to talk about Allen. This is a guy that he's 20 years old. He's the youngest guy in the NFL right now, I do believe. He's 6'1", 235. He's behind Breece Hall. I understand that, but Breece Hall does have an injury history, so they may want to take that workload off. Well, this guy is a monster of a man, and he can really handle that if Breece Hall does get hurt. So I absolutely love this guy. There's clear path for him to get some type of workload in year one. I absolutely love Allen. I wish he wasn't behind Hall. You and me talked about it. I had Allen as possibly could have been the number 1 back in this class. So I absolutely love this spot. I'm going to leave Vidal for you to bring up because we both have the same thing on him.
Okay. Again, on Allen, you're also talking about Salah is the head coach there who comes from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. We all know they like to train in and out of running backs. So again, I think there's some work for Allen year one. And again, we desperately needed that at running back. We took another shot at the very next pick with Vidal out of Los Angeles. I know Gus Edwards is there. I know J.K. Dobbins is there. But this is the first running back drafted by the new Jim Harbaugh regime. And we have the man made of glass himself, J.K. Dobbins, on our roster. So it was almost kind of like, well, if Dobbins works, we're good. If Dobbins doesn't work, then that means Vidal's probably getting some run. So it was one of those picks for us that it was a little safety pick. It either works really well or it doesn't. It doesn't matter. And then the Jermaine Burton, I know you said you won't talk about it, so I will. I've been watching videos since we drafted him. This kid's getting in some deep connections with Joe Burrow already. I saw some videos from things. Oh my goodness, that looks like a connection that could be really nice for both of them. Because let's be honest, Jamar Chase is getting the number one defensive corner every game, as he should, with the safety help shadowing over top. That's going to leave a lot of work on the opposite side of the field. So I like Jermaine Burton. I like it more if T. Higgins does get traded. At the worst, though, it's 1 year of T. Higgins, Brant.
Absolutely.
Finishing out the third round, you had Guerrero and then Will Shipley. What do you think of those two running backs there, Brant?
I have no idea what the role for Guerrero is going to be in San Francisco. There's so much there. Mitchell's done just fine spilling CMC. I know CMC's a little older. So I don't really know what the role is. They draft a running back every single year, so we'll just have to wait and see what his role will be. As for Shipley, he's sitting there. He's backing up Saquon Barkley, who does have an injury history. So if something were to happen to Saquon, this guy could have a clear role. He's very agile and makes people miss, so I think he could end up with some type of pass catching work. But that's a really hard depth chart to even, if you count the receivers and everything else, it's really hard depth chart to climb.
Yep. All right. I don't have a whole lot to say about those two picks. So we'll go to the fourth round. We'll move through this round a little quicker. I might go ahead and hit you with 6 picks at a time, Brent, if you can manage that. McMillan at the 4-1, Rattler at the 4-2, Tracy at the 4-3, McCaffrey's brother at the 4-4, Bucky Irving at the 4-6 or 4-5, and Lobb at the 4-6. Brant, any of those picks stick out to you that you want to talk about a little bit?
McMillan, I think, is the second best wide receiver out of Washington there. Rattler is a guy that you got to go with. He's only sitting behind Carr. And then I'm going to talk about Tracy. I'm going to talk about Tracy a little in depth. He's the running back. He's going to New York Giants at the 4-3. This is an absolute steal. He's 24 years old. He had 223 pounds, 113 carries, 716 yards, 8 touchdowns last year. Really, the only thing that scares me in front of him is Singletary, who we've watched get beat multiple year after year after year, get his starting role taken. Tracy could easily be the number one back in New York going into the season. So I absolutely love this pick down here at the 4-3.
Yeah, I like the 4-5 quite a bit with Bucky Irvine. He was one of the picks or the players coming out that I really liked. He just had tested really poorly, which you can't do when you're an undersized running back. But I do think there's a path to work for him. Sitting behind Rashad White. I think Bucky Irvine could be a very, very interesting pass catching back, a third down specialist, if you will, which again, there's money to be made in the fantasy world when you're a third down running back. We've seen plenty of those guys. James White out of New England was a fantasy asset for many, many years, sitting behind lots of other names in New England. So I like Irvine there at the 4-5. I think there's a chance there's some work for him. And again, in such a weak running back class, I don't mind dart throws in the 5th round or the 4th round here, Brant. All right, let's finish this out. 4-7 was Johnson. 4-8 was Rice. 4-9 was Jordan Travis. 4-10 was your namesake and Walker. 4-11 was Washington. And then 4-12 was All. What do you think of all that, Brant?
So Rice is a guy that I think could easily crack the depth chart there in the Chargers, and he's got a great quarterback with Herbert. He's got a great surrounding in his home life with his father and everything else. This is a guy that I definitely don't mind this dart throw. And I'll talk about Walker, Devontae Walker. He struggled with some eligibility issues through the NCAA. He was a guy that was talked about as being possibly one of the top wide receivers in this class for the longest time. 6'2", he's 193 pounds. Going to Baltimore, where the depth chart is still a little shaky. You have Mark Andrews, you have Zay Flowers, and then I guess you got Bateman if he ever stays healthy, and that's really about it. There's not a whole lot, so I absolutely love this Walker pick.
Yeah, so for me, my favorite one there is Jordan Travis. This in a Superflex league, Brent. This is a guy that his stock plummeted because he got hurt. Florida State missed the bowl game, so he didn't really get to show his talent and what he possesses against some of the cream of the crop talent, if you will. I think it's just that's holding him back. He sits for a year or two behind Aaron Rodgers in New York, and then he stands to inherit some really good weapons in Garrett Wilson and Malachi Corley, who we spent some time talking about on the show in a few years as he gets himself healthy. And again, you get to sit behind one of the best and learn from A-Rod for a few years. There's nothing bad about that. And again, he's another name of why taxis are there this late in the draft. What a better guy to pick up, because there's plenty of names in that 4th round that'll end up being guys that you drop for a second kicker or defense at some point throughout the course of the season. I don't think Jordan Travis will be that guy. So all in all, Brant, it was a very fun draft. Again, I'm sure you and I will talk about this orphan team as we move through the off season. At some point, it'll come back up. But before, I know you're itching, Brant. I know you really want to get in and talk about some of these sleepers because there's some guys you're really excited about. There's something I'm really excited about that we got to talk about here. The Fantasy Holics are doing a Holics versus a Fans Dynasty startup draft this year, Brant. There's 6 people on the Fantasy Holics team that are going to be a part of this, including both the Fatboyz. So this is your chance to come out and beat the Fatboyz. All you have to do is be one of the top engagers on the social media pages, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, wherever you get your Fantasy Holics. Be one of the top engagers. Let them know you're interested in being a part of this league. Come out and get you a shot at Fatboyz and some of the other pros from the Fantasy Holics team, Brant. I'm excited about it. I love startup drafts and Dynasty anyway, especially when you get a chance to see some people where people like names in certain spots. versus some of the others. And we play with plenty of leagues with fantasy holic guys, so we know where they're at. I want to see some fresh blood in this, Brant.
Absolutely. It's definitely going to be a fun time. Like you said, just be one of the top engagers on our Facebook and social media platforms. Get in, enjoy this startup draft. It's going to be a fun time. Come at the Fatboyz and see what you can do. It's going to be a fun time to get involved and definitely to restart and see where you guys are at.
Yeah, definitely do something creative. Put, hashtag fan league or something in all your interactions so these guys know that you're interested. I'm sure Brant and I will be voicing our opinion on some folks that we want to see added as well. Some of our top engagers on some of our casts. We'll have to get some names in there as well, but definitely get in there. It'd be exciting for you guys to get a chance to come in and play with some fantasy holics, and you'll hear about that league being broken down on this podcast as well. So definitely a chance to brag to your buddies that, hey, look at this, my podcast is being broken down on this pretty big Facebook page here. So definitely don't hesitate. Get in there and get engaging. You got a couple months to do so, but get after it, hit it hard, Brant. All right, let's talk about some of these sleepers here, Brant. I know there's some names that you're very excited about, so I'm going to let you start us off here. Go ahead and take us away with some of your sleepers.
Well, I hit one of my favorite one with Tracy there, the running back out of New York. That was my favorite one in this for one of my sleepers. But another one is this Cornelius Johnson, wide receiver out of Michigan that went to the Los Angeles Chargers in an open depth chart. That you have Quentin Johnston. Yes, they added Ladd McConkey. They added Rice, but they also added a guy that Jim Harbaugh knows very well and how to get the ball to him. 6'3", 208 pounds. This is a guy that absolutely could easily jump on this depth chart and move up. I understand Joshua Palmer's still there. They did add DJ Chark, but this is a guy that you definitely could see moving up the depth chart there pretty quickly.
One of my favorite undrafted names, Brant, is Bub Means out of the University of Pittsburgh. First of all, it's just a fun name. How could you not be great at something when your name's Bub Means? He's 6'1", 212 pounds. He was drafted in the 5th round by the New Orleans Saints. In 2023, he had 41 receptions, 721 yards receiving, 17.6 yards per catch, 6 touchdowns. And he was above average in all testing metrics at the combine. He wasn't number one at any of them, but he was up in the top half of every testing category. So he's got some athleticism to pair with this, some smarts. And really, Brant, you look at the New Orleans Saints wide receiving room outside Chris Olave and I guess Rashid Shaheed, there's really nothing guaranteed there. There's definitely a clear line of work for Bub Means. And again, this is a guy that if you get in the last round of your draft, or if you wait till waivers clear after your draft, this may be one of those sneaky plays that you pick up and you're getting some performance out of him sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. So my last one that I really have, he's 6'3", 194 pounds. And I believe he was drafted. He was undrafted. He was a Welsh rugby player. This is the Luis Rees-Zammit, the running back that signed with the Kansas City Chiefs, sitting behind Isaiah Pacheco and CEH, which isn't hard to pass up. This is a guy that we've already started to see a little thing in this rookie mini camps that they've had. This is a guy that could crack the lineup. He could just be a return man, but he's definitely got some speed and the ability to make people miss. This is a guy that could be extremely fun to watch. And we've seen what the Kansas City Chiefs backfield can do. You saw, help me out here, the last 2 weeks of last year, 2 years ago.
With Isaiah Pacheco?
Nope, not Pacheco. The one
McKinnon, Jerick McKinnon.
McKinnon. You've seen what he could do out of the backfield with that offense. You've seen what Pacheco can do. This is a guy that could be a sneaky pick to add onto your tag.
Yeah, speaking of a sneaky pick, Brant, my favorite, this is an absolute homer pick. I've got my Mizzou Tigers stuff up here on the wall, so it's only natural that I'm going to talk about the guy who carried them to a bowl game win over the Ohio State University this year. Cody Schrader, running back. He came from a junior college, played 2 years at Mizzou. 5'9", 214 pounds. He was an undrafted free agent signing with the San Francisco 49ers. This guy is a do-it-all running back. He's a physical pound it. This is a guy that Kyle Shanahan's going to fall in absolute love with. Last year at Mizzou, Brant, in the tough SEC where we saw lots and lots and lots of defensive players drafted in this draft come from. He had 276 carries, 1,627 yards rushing in the SEC, averaged 5.9 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns. These are video game numbers. And this is just rushing stats. He added several yards through the air and more touchdowns through the air as well. But this is a guy that, again, if he makes the 53-man roster in San Francisco, which I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but we all know how Kyle Shanahan likes his running backs. If he makes it, I think Cody Schrader could be a pick that you pick up on your back and on your taxi. And if something, God forbid, happens to Christian McCaffrey, which we've seen happen before, Brant, you're talking about a guy that could step up and be a league winner. That's how good Cody Schrader is if he gets the opportunity. I know he's a little small, and that may have hurt him a little bit, but he's a workhorse running back. I think Kyle Shanahan will fall in love with him.
Absolutely. Absolutely, he could be.
All right. Well, Brant, I think that does it for us on this week's episode. Again, guys, if you're interested in being a part of that fan versus the Holics League, get on there. Make sure you're engaging. Engage on this podcast. Whatever you got to do, get yourself in there as a top engager at the end of the month.
Absolutely. Get yourself noticed. Get in there. Share our post. That definitely helps out a lot with the engaging of sharing our posts and getting them out there. Because if you share it to your page and the more people, I think, share it off your page, I think that actually boosts your numbers a little bit too. So definitely get out there, share those out, and join the Fatboyz, join the Fantasy Holics, get out there in our league. It's going to be a fun time. We'll be and we'll be breaking it down almost every week. And then let's talk about the orphan team one more time. That orphan team, as we get into our starts and sits, we'll be talking about who we needed to start and sit on that orphan team every single week as well on the live.
Maybe we'll just set our lineups on the live every week, Brant.
Yeah, might as well. I mean, I have way too many of them as it is, I feel like.
Me too. It'll help me remember we're definitely degenerates. But I think that is it for us on this week's episode, Brant. So,
as always, stay hungry.
Stay fat, my friends.